The eponymous real-life killer of our first film needs no introduction. When I was a kid, his name was uttered on schoolyard playgrounds with an ominous reverence reserved for angry gods. In kitchens, his name fell out of mouths of mothers with a fear masked as disgust. Indeed, the name Dahmer has come to embody the latent monstrosities we secretly believe is inherent in us all. He was our darkest fear, our most repressed desires. He was our boogeyman. Directed by David Jacobson, Dahmer is a 2002 film that takes a cursory look into the life of one of America's most infamous killers. On the surface, Jeffrey Dahmer is every serial killer cliche. He's unassuming, quiet, and disappears into the fabric of humanity. He has a menial job at a chocolate factory and generally keeps to himself. He's the kind of guy you might find at a comic book convention or playing Dungeons and Dragons, but Dahmer has a hobby of a much different nature. He lures attractive men up to his apartment, doses them, dismembers them, screws them, and eats them, but not necessarily in that order. After witnessing a tone-setting kidnapping and killing, which nearly leads to Dahmer's demise, we move swiftly into another kidnapping. Dahmer invites an attractive young man up to his apartment for beers and romance. During this date, which will prove to be his last, Dahmer reminisces about the circumstances leading up to his first killing. Jacobson intercuts past and present, showing us disturbing details which have now become legendary. Legendary and disturbing, yes, but with more restraint than I had anticipated. Because of Dahmer's reputation preceding the film, I felt a sense of dread for what I was about to see. But although there are certainly gruesome and graphic moments, Jacobson doesn't resort to the splatterfest a lesser director would have reveled in. Despite that restraint, or maybe because of it, he was able to sustain dread and horror throughout, a commendable display of craftsmanship. Now, the trouble with any biopic is that the audience invariably knows the ending before they even enter the theater. So the challenge for a filmmaker is not to surprise an audience by what happens to them at the end of their play, but rather to get us to empathize with them as they endure the trials and tribulations of their lives. Empathy is especially problematic with serial killer biopics for obvious reasons. And I realized then that the reason so many serial killer films center on an investigation is because the investigator provides a character we can empathize with them. Without them, we generally stand in judgment of the main character, which usually means we stand apart from the film, which generally takes us right out of the drama. Now, there's no investigation in Dahmer, and no good guys to side with. Jacobson walks a fine line. He flirts dangerously close to asking us to sympathize with the monster he presents. In fact, there's a scene where Dahmer cries uncontrollably after committing his first murder. And I'm curious, guys, were you feeling vindicated because this monster felt terrible about what he'd done? Or were you feeling bad for him just a little because he couldn't help what he was?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the reason, you mentioned that there's no police investigation on screen during the film. I think that David Jacobson is the one doing the investigating. When you're watching the movie, he's the one investigating into the life of Jeffrey Dahmer. So the film itself stands as an investigation.
Oh, hello.
Oh, sorry.
That's Max doing his impersonation of a dog.
Or a Dahmer victim.
That's an interesting take on it, Tom. I mean, I sort of felt like he was asking us to side with him and experience his life through what Dahmer felt about it. And it's difficult to do that because of what the guy's up to. You know what I mean?
Of course.
I think he was definitely. I mean, there were definite attempts throughout the movie to lead the audience to empathy with the character. Definitely, Joe. Did you feel like it was? Did it work? Did you feel?
I feel that it's a courageous move, but I think it's problematic because we know what this guy's up to and we know what he's doing, and because he's a real life character, we can't take fun in his killings like we do with Mickey and Mallory from Natural Born Killers. We can't be like, hey, we're on a killing spree with this guy. We know, his reputation precedes him and it precedes this film. So we can't, there's a disconnect there already. So he's structured this film as a film about, like a film that you would be siding with somebody and empathizing with somebody, but you can't do that.
I disagree. I think that again, and we'll give a spoiler. I mean, at the end of the film, the director shows you that Dahmer himself made a decision to walk away from getting any kind of therapy to help himself when his father drops him off, and instead of going into the room, he decides to leave the building,
But right
hop over a
before,
fence, and go off into the wilderness of violence.
it's true, but right before that, he's whining like he's like a baby saying the reason. It basically says, "You just don't want to hear my problems" to his father, which is a very adolescent thing that a child of any kid who might say who has teen angst.
Right. Well,
And
he obviously.
so should so yeah, he makes that decision, but is that decision because he's got the rebellion of the typical teenager, American teenager? You know what I'm saying? Like
I do know what you're saying. I think he was at an age where he was beginning to he was understanding what he was becoming, and I think that the director shows you that it was his choice to not want to get any help from his father, from whatever from the psychiatrist that he was about to walk into. He decides to walk off, and yeah, maybe it was because he was disconnected from his father. He didn't like his father. He obviously didn't like the church upbringing that his parents probably pounded into his brain. And yeah, there was some rebellion there, but.
Yeah, and I don't think that Jacobson intended or that he really should give us a pat answer to why he did what he did, because there really is no single answer. It's not teen rebellion. It's not psychosis per se. It's something that's it's not it can't be answered. It's something that's inexplicable.
It seemed to me that he really had obviously problems with his sexuality, and from what I understand in the film is that being a homosexual, he the reason why he did a lot of these violent things to these people was because he wanted to, he was more he was more of a giver, not a taker, and he wanted to be able to control that.
I don't. That's dangerous, man, because there's a lot of people who have repressed,
Of
urges or
course.
whatever, who don't go
I
and start
know,
chopping
and
people up.
I am not. I'm not saying that feel for the man. I'm not making, I'm not making excuses. I'm just trying to understand some of the reasons behind it.
Right, right. Yeah,
And I
I
think
mean,
that's what Jacobson was doing. He was just trying. Yeah, hey, man, this is a really, Joe. You know that this is a very hard story to
oh,
tell.
dude, it's such a difficult story. I mean, and on one point, I give a lot of credit to the guy for doing that, like not having the investigator in there and asking us to sympathize with this monster in some ways, like, I mean, that takes a lot of balls to do that,
Yeah, definitely.
but at the same time, it makes the film not entirely hit its mark exactly right. You know what I mean? And I don't know that you can hit your mark when you're doing a biopic that's focused on that serial killer. What do you guys? What do you?
Max, yeah, what's on
Yeah,
your
what do you
mind?
guys?
Well, the first thing I thought of when Thomas said, I want you to watch Dahmer and Ted Bundy, I was really scared because I already not just had those films, but owned them in a little box set that came with Ed Gein, which I think is the weakest of the three,
Yeah.
that was put out by the same company.
Yeah.
And I had seen Dahmer a couple times, and for some reason, I found it initially when I saw it to be actually very artful and surprisingly well done considering the budget and all the other things.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I don't know what it is. It's like, you can slap the name Dahmer on a movie and you can do whatever the fuck you want because no one cares about Jeffrey and everyone wants to piss on the legacy of an evil serial killer.
Such an easy thing to do, yeah.
It's so easy. But the thing about this, which I was really surprised, because as I was watching it, I'm like, that didn't happen, that didn't happen, that didn't happen. And then afterward, I did my homework. And I went on and I watched a ton of interviews with the real Jeffrey, a ton of interviews with his father, and I was stunned to learn that most everything that happens in the film, Jeffrey admits and it actually happened.
Yeah.
And they took cinematic license, but my God,
they
shit
combined a
went down.
couple. They combined a couple of killings together, and they made a couple of they consolidated a few things, but that was pretty. It's pretty close, and he structured the film in a
non-linear way.
Yeah, in a way that was interesting and much better than the later film, in my opinion. But you know what? You brought up a point, Max, which is you own those films, and there's something inherently attractive to us about the mystique of serial killers, man. And it's something that should be dragged into the light right here, and and talked about what it is about serial killers. And I think there's nobody better to speak on that than the evil Reverend Billy Grimm, obviously.
Thank you. Well, first off, Tom, I would really like to thank you for introducing me to a film about which I could write the following note. The ass rape scenes were really well shot and edited.
You loved the strobe light effect, didn't you?
I thought that was the most cinematic passage in the movie, technically speaking. So, but I think I'm kind of in the minority here. I just don't think this film deserves any commentary at all. I thought it was garbage.
Wow.
I thought it was really badly produced, badly directed, and excepting Jeremy Renner, badly acted. He was an amazing. I mean, his performance is really good, and there must have surely been the temptation to go over the top in some stuff.
No, if his performance is really, if you're saying that it's really good, how could the film be total garbage then? If there's a performance there that's really good, there's no way that this film is total garbage.
He's a great actor, man. I mean, what else? Does anybody know what else he's been in?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, he's
been in SWAT.
Yeah, he's been running the action movie
The Hurt
cycle.
Locker.
Yeah, he just was nominated for an Oscar for The Hurt Locker.
Right.
Yeah, he's
Mission Impossible.
He reminded me of a young Malcolm McDowell from A Clockwork Orange.
Yeah,
he was. Yeah, he had an intensity on that scale, definitely.
Yeah,
he was great in The Hurt Locker. Actually, I remember that, man. He's fantastic. He's great, man.
Yep.
And he won an Independent Spirit Award for this performance, I believe, for Best Actor.
But Billy, what is it technically speaking? It starts in the script, I would imagine, and I think it has something to do with what I was talking about. But yeah, what is it that makes it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just I get the feeling that it was slapped together. It felt like a TV movie, and there was. I think that it was a half-baked script. I think that script needed a lot of work because nothing happens in the movie. That's the problem. They just stretch things out. That's probably a 50-page script stretched into an hour and a half.
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
And the acting just can't support it. The directing just can't support it. There's just long passages that are incredibly boring. I mean, I just found myself bored.
I disagree. I'll tell you right now, and you guys are going to really come at me.
You disagree that I found myself bored?
No, I disagree that it was. I disagree that it was boring. I don't think that it was a boring film at all. As a matter of fact, the beginning of the film with Dahmer, and you guys are going to get all over me on this one, the being in the chocolate factory, working in the factory, and around the machines, and just the way the music was playing, I found it kind of Lynchian in a lot of ways.
Red curtains in Dahmer's apartment, like crazy.
And the skeleton, with one of the males that he attracted up there. Billy, I got to be honest with you. I really find a lot in this movie. I find it very artistic, and I think that it has a lot to say. And he captures a mood a la David Lynch is capable of doing.
I think that there was the possibility that in better directorial hands and with a better script, you are right. I actually liked the idea in retrospect that this all sort of took place in one night, and he had these reminiscences. The idea I liked. I just thought everything about the production was half-baked.
I think I fall in between you guys, and I think it's because of the script, and I think it's because serial killers in general, because there's a monotony to serial killing, and I think it's in both films that it becomes the same thing over and over, and I think the attempt here was to divide it up, and I think the intention was good to break it, and the structure was good, but But
Well, I felt exactly what you said, only I would not have been as kind about it. I'm really the wrong person to talk to about this stuff because I think serial killer movies are by and large ridiculous. I just think they're so stupid because they're serial. It's like a guy kills.
And kills
What's
again.
he gonna do after
Gonna
that?
kill
He's gonna
again, Bill.
kill, and then after that,
Oh.
he's gonna kill. And so it's like there's nothing for me. And the fact that they're based on real life. Here's my problem. I love documentaries, and a good documentary about a serial killer is going to be. I've never seen a fictionalized version of a serial killer or a movie adaptation of a real life serial killer that was better than a documentary about that same person. And that's part of the power, as you said, the allure of serial killers. They're fascinating people, and we are obsessed with them culturally.
Yeah.
But the real ones are always going to be more fascinating than the screen version. I'm sorry.
You bring up an interesting point, Bill. And Max mentioned before that Ed Gein was a part of that set, and he mentioned that it's a crappy movie, and I've seen it, and it's an incredibly crappy movie. But any film that's been loosely based on the idea of Ed Gein, from Psycho to Texas Chainsaw Massacre to Silence of the Lambs, are all really brilliant pieces of work.
But what did they do in all three of those instances? They diverged so far from the original story. Look at the one version of Ed Gein that has been literally adapted that, Max, you said is a piece of garbage.
Are we talking about the one where Kane Hodder played Ed Gein, or the one where Steve Railsback played Ed Gein?
Railsback.
Yeah. It's really flat, especially after all those triumphs that you mentioned there, Psycho and everything. What was the question?
I mean, those films all become about the director's vision of an interpretation, not staying so closely to that. So again, it goes back to our collective obsession and fetishism with serial killers, and they're just providing a service for us by making these films, by making the documentaries, by putting the cameras on death row. Serial killer killings take up less than 1% of the murders in America, but they're so blown out of proportion in the media and
it's like
in
shark
films.
attacks.
Yeah, they're darlings in the media. Yeah.
So I mean, I want Max to answer the question I asked before. Like, what is it that you think that because you're obviously a fan of serial killers, and I have to admit that I have a certain fascination with them as well.
So do I.
What is it
Absolutely.
that you think that fascinates us about these guys?
Well, clearly that's a complex question, but Billy was talking about the fact that there is no film that is more interesting than a documentary on a serial killer, and I have to disagree because one of the top 3 films, and it was such a hard question, I know I'm jumping ahead, but Thomas said, what are your 3 horror films? And Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, I think is the greatest film ever made about a serial killer.
I without careful consideration, I have to agree with you, man. It's a fantastic film.
Yeah, made by a really good director too. That guy's whole body of work is tremendous.
Completely. And it transcends everything, and it defines the you just think of a gray day, and you think of a guy waking up, and you think of the work that he does, and his job may be to be the bug man who comes to the house with the tank to squirt the bugs, or whatever. And that was loosely based on Henry Lee Lucas. It wasn't really about Henry Lee Lucas. They stole a couple of things from his case, but they kind of created their own Henry. Because that's what you can do. Like I mentioned, you can slap on a name. That's why they only called it Henry. They didn't call it Henry Lee Lucas. They had an Otis Toole. He was just an Otis. So it didn't fucking matter. You had these 2 guys doing terrible, awful, horrible things in a very stoic, documentarian way that truly, I think, defined their process. And I think it's just feeding this empty void. And I think that's why we get so into it, because it just feeds us. If you live in Los Angeles and you hear about serial killers out here, which is rare, but some have been popping up lately. We had a guy out here that was killing homeless people. And that was the only story I was reading in the Times. This guy would go up to a sleeping bum, pull out a giant knife, and start stabbing that bum. And that was horrifying to me, and I wanted to understand why he was doing these things. And I think these guys are, their mental standards aside, I think they're bored, and I think they're hungry, and I think they can't help it. It's part of their. It's like pissing and pooping for these guys.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Max, especially about the boredom. If you noticed in both films, but we'll stick to this one. They tend to drink a lot, like and they consume a ton of alcohol, and this all mixes into to these patterns that they develop and everything, and it's really bizarre.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's as I sip Zono Sauv Blanc from New Zealand. But I've never killed anyone. I'd like to, but I never will.
Oh, I hope not. Joe,
have you guys ever killed anybody?
Not yet.
Do you think about that, Bill?
Not me personally.
I have to give. I'm gonna go ahead and say no on that one. I don't think I've ever really sat and played it all out in my head. No, I'm gonna say no.
Fleeting thoughts, I would say. Not obsessive thoughts for sure.
Wow.
I mean, I don't. Listen. You think. Like I think about it, and then it's like that. Like as soon as you get to a certain point, it's like alarms start going off. Like it's not even serious. It's almost like a flirtation, and then as soon as it's almost like it's the same feeling. Like if you're ever driving in a car and you're like, wow, if I swerved right now and hit that tree, and then like the sensation of dying, like or just do you guys ever have that? Like
yeah, absolutely. There's like minor little flashes of fantasy about death in general, about like hitting someone else. Like I have recurrent neurotic, nightmares about certain death issues. But it's interesting. The first time I take back my earlier statement, I just remembered the first time I ever really actively had the thought, I wish that person was dead, or I would like to kill that person, was just in the last 6 months, and it's never happened to me before. Like people say that they have fantasies about killing people, and I always just thought it was sort of like facetious, But then, like, it actually happened to me, and I was like, wow, so that's what that feels like.
Billy, did it have anything to do with Newt Gingrich?
You're obsessed, man. You are really. You have something to prove. I'm gonna have to interview you about this one-on-one at some point. But you have like.
I would love to see Max as the Pig Billy character kill Newt Gingrich.
Jesus
oh
Christ.
Yeah, I like that.
I think just going back to that question, Max, I think that's it. I think most people don't have it because we have so many locks on that emotion and red flags that that we guard ourselves against that. But I think that there's something probably, if we're honest with each other and if we get down to a place where all our defenses are down, that maybe there is that thing at the bottom of us that can kill somebody, and it's frightening. And Max, who do you want to kill?
Be honest, Max.
No, I definitely have a big imagination, and fleeting thoughts come into it, but obviously I will never do anything. But I got to tell you, I went to a gun club recently, and I shot guns for the first time in years and years, and there was nothing like shooting a revolver and a semi-automatic and a rifle.
Wow.
And shooting into a target. Oh my God, it felt so good. And
I can't get into that, man. Max, I got to be honest
with you. Have you ever shot a gun, Tom?
No, I don't want to shoot a gun.
You've got to shoot a gun.
They're designed. They are designed for one thing, and that is for killing things.
Stop it. They're not. They're for killing people that enter your home and do things to your babies.
Well, before we move into political territory, there is something about shooting a gun that pokes right at that center that we were just talking about. Like
it's a quick fix for a sense of power.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Yeah, and it's like a direct shot right into that small little.
It's like a needle of horse adrenaline into your spinal column.
But you guys aren't talking about something that's kept in a locked box. You give your wife the key, and if there's a sincere threat, you act upon it. That thing never comes out. It's just always there. That's all.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah,
that's not
I mean-
good for you, Thomas.
No, I can't jump aboard on that one, Max. I'm gonna have to disagree with you. I don't like guns. I don't I don't want to have anything to do with them.
Neither do I, but I shot one because I'm a human walking around on this earth, and I just
Yeah, at least shoot one. I mean, it's a lot of. I don't shoot guns. I'm a very peaceful, loving dude.
Yeah, I don't
But
even.
shooting a gun is fucking hot.
Oh boy.
I only shoot small cats that are crawling across my backyard. But other than that,
I only shoot hitchhikers.
well,
Are
if
you
we're gonna
into
go,
knives? Are you into knives,
Knives.
Thomas? Underrated. I've got a ton of knives.
Max, I love knives. The name of the show is The Cutting Room.
Thomas, you're a man with a baby. I see you in that profile picture. You're holding a kid. That's your kid, right?
That's my girlfriend's baby, but I love him as if he were my
Oh,
own
okay,
son.
so you love him as if you're.
We
okay.
all live together, yes.
That's
Yeah.
a beautiful thing. All right, so you're not into knives. You don't like the guns. I'm just saying, what happens when what jiu-jitsu? What happens?
I
when-
have a very large penis.
Oh well,
And a black belt in sarcasm.
then we're done, and that's it. A big giant dick is going to rule all. I mean,
but wait. There's something different than wanting to exert power over somebody and defend yourself. That's very.
Yeah, I would
those
say these
are two very different things.
absolutely different impulses.
But the power,
definitely.
but
swinging his thing.
the power thing is what's at the root of serial killers. I mean, from everything that we put together, from reading about them and hearing their interviews, it's about controlling them. And it's funny because I was thinking about this. It has everything to do with the first movie that we were talking about today, and it's about possessing them. And especially in Dahmer's case, I mean, I think he said something. Paraphrasing here, that he ate them because he can possess them totally.
Yes.
Right.
You know?
It's funny you mention that, Joe, because Jacobson doesn't at all involve himself in the cannibalism of Jeffrey Dahmer. You don't.
Yeah.
He doesn't get into it at all.
Yeah, I know, and I think that had to do, and I think it's the same case with Matthew Bright with the other movie, the Ted Bundy movie. I think that they were aiming toward as wide an audience as they could, so there were certain things that they veered away from. I believe, it is weird because cannibal is put right on the cover art, so. Something's going on there.
Yeah, I don't understand, Bill. Do you have any reason why he might have left that out, or the writer left it out? Or?
I just disregard any artistic merit for this film at all. I just thought it was a piece of shit. But the going back to the serial killer point, I think our fascination. I mean, I am absolutely fascinated with real life serial killers, and I went through a period a couple of years ago. CrimeLibrary.com has nightmares galore if you want to have some sleepless nights. Detailing the real life events of them. I think part of the fascination is that deep within all of us is the infantile murderous child who just wants to have our own way and do whatever we want and not have to do what anyone tells us to. And serial killers, they just go around, I mean, they just don't care. And that liberation that we imagine them to have is, I think, part of the allure why we keep, reading about them and making movies about them.
Yeah.
But for that very reason, Joe, like what you were saying earlier, like to me, if you take two David Fincher films, Seven and Zodiac, Seven is really a bad movie in the long run because it's just a geek show about how this guy's going to kill his next victim.
It's about the investigation.
Right.
Well, but it's like you're just following him, and you're just waiting for him to make his next kill and for the detectives to follow it. But for my money, Zodiac is a much better film because it pays even more attention to the fact that you can't know what is in anyone's head, let alone a serial killer's head. So the more interesting thing is to watch how everyone around them behaves, which I think shows Fincher's maturity as a director.
Well, that's interesting.
I'm sorry, Joe. I just want to tell Billy I love Zodiac, and I think that the murder scene in the couple in Wine Country, is one of the most well done killing scenes that I've ever seen. I think that, and there's a scene in the movie in Larry Clark's film Bully that's also a really great murder scene.
Bully is amazing.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of that, like And also in Nick Cassavetes' movie Alpha Dog too, when the kid gets killed, there's also something really frightening there. But all three of those scenes kind of like you feel like you're being murdered yourself, and somehow the director relays that to the viewer. And I think that there are three outstanding murder scenes, and Fincher's Zodiac scene is great, man.
Yeah, Max. Just real quick, last note on that. I actually agree with you. With Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. That's one you think is better than, and for me, actually, Zodiac I think is really brilliant. So I just shot my own argument in the foot. So.
Hey, but Billy, you were just saying that what's so interesting is not that you can understand what someone else is doing, but is thinking. But it's interesting to see what's happening, how the other people around them react. But I think it's equally interesting and terrifying to examine a person that is behaving erratically and irrationally,
yes,
and not know what they're going to be up to or why they're doing what they're doing. I think that. And I think that's equally fascinating, actually.
I do, and for me, the instances where it's been more successful are those that we've already listed that veer further away from documentary fact and into dramatic license. And I think in the hands of the right director and writer and all involved, it can become really fascinating. I just think that in general. The ones that follow the real story fall flat most of the time.
Mm.
So there is a challenge out there for someone to put together a epic, brilliant story about a real life serial killer. I mean, this.
How about that, Joe?
Well,
Max, do you look like any real life serial killers? We could put.
Well, when I was young and handsome and less fat, I was always told Warren Beatty, but he was only a lady killer. So.
I love Warren Beatty, man.
Tom looks like Richard Gere.
Yeah.
Does?
No.
No, Tom actually looks like Jabba Chamberlain, the setup man for the Yankees.
I get that all the time. And I'll tell you something real, Max, I'll tell you something really, this is the worst. I was in Baltimore, Maryland recently, and I walk into a restaurant, I love, right, because, I love to eat, and the host goes, "Hey, you look like," I really wanted to cry. He goes, "Hey, man, did anybody ever tell you look like John Goodman?"
Oh, no!
So I had a salad that night.
You had a salad?
Let's have a glass of water and a salad.
Oh, I love it.
Oh.
Hey, did you guys happen to watch, and, forgive me, but the commentary for Dahmer? Dahmer?
No, I did not. I did on the other one. I watched.
Yeah, so did I on the other one.
Yeah, but not.
Well, did you know that the original title of the film was "The Mind Is of Its Own: Paradise Lost"?
No.
Holy crap!
Wow.
Also, in the making of doc, the cinematographer, I believe, says the goal was to make the mundane unnerving. And that's probably, maybe Billy's having trouble with the flatness.
Yeah.
But I think that was achieved very successfully.
I agree with you, Max. I think that the film is disturbingly patient, and there's very little violence in it. And to me, that's it's very effective. Where I'm, where you're just kind of like just watching it slowly unravel. And
yeah, because you know what that guy's capable of and what he's about to do.
I don't need to see it. I don't see a lot of that. But what I got out of this film was just a very, very controlled and interesting performance from.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If it wasn't for that performance, there would be no salvaging the film.
Yeah.
I mean, because he invites you to come to look into it.
That's good.
Even more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's really good. Hey, Bill, you didn't even like that scene when the father wanted to look inside that box where
harrowing.
I thought that was really well done, man, and I it was so freaking disturbing. I thought you would appreciate a scene like that, man.
That one didn't really do it for me, but I will say that I thought the scene with the wrestler kid where they're getting high. I thought that was really well done. I thought it was
That whole afternoon
really
they
well
kind of spent
acted
together.
on. Yeah, I thought that was really well acted by both of those guys, and the dialogue was really good.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting conversation because someone was actually, like, he was trying to fake his way around his own um, personality and sort of
Yeah.
make excuses for himself, and the other guy was actually hitting him back with interesting rebuttals. So I thought that was a really
Yeah,
that was
very
actually a
strong.
scene I
We
enjoyed.
talked
Sexual
about
manipulation.
Yeah, we talked about rebellion, and that's a great scene in that movie. Because that kid does consider, his victim considers, he's the typical teenage American, rebel, and Dahmer, who we talked about earlier, winds up rebelling, early in his life, and winds up killing, the cliched American teen rebel, and I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, the other thing that is interesting is that in both that scene with the wrestler and the present the present scene with the other kid, the black kid, is that he's projecting his own you know psychosis and traumas or whatever you call them onto them. Like he's saying, didn't you say you're he was calling him, he was trying to
He was saying
convince
you
him that
came
he's
back
gay,
here
and then and then he was trying to convince the other guy that he was had perverted thoughts or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just another way to invite our empathy. Actually, I mean, it's a really good device. Actually, it's a screenwriting trick where a character is projecting his own thoughts onto another character. It's really actually a really clever screenwriting
Yeah,
trick.
yeah. And I thought because he did that especially in a protracted way with the wrestler scene and had the wrestler you know arguing back intelligently, I thought that worked really well.
Yeah, exactly. It was a nice bit of screenwriting there.
Absolutely.
What about one last thing too? I wanted to bring up. They don't get into the trial, at all too. I mean, is this something that you think needed to be included whatsoever? Like him being in court or anything like that, or you think it wouldn't fit into this movie?
Yeah, look, I mean, we know. See, that's the thing is that we know what
Right.
happened, so it's not necessary. So, my issue is that what the filmmaker was trying to say didn't emerge. It didn't crystallize. His commentary, and this is where I think maybe as we're talking about it, I'm starting to realize actually is that in those other films that you had talked about, Billy, before Psycho and some of the other films of fictionalized real life killers, it became about the filmmaker's vision. And here, I don't know that his statement ever crystallized, and not that it needs. I need it to be a pat statement or some nice tidy moral tale, but his his stance or his comment on it never really did it. And if he, I think, and here maybe is where my problem is, if he committed completely to asking us to empathize with Dahmer, geez, man, I mean, he would have made a notorious film that would have been incredibly interesting to watch.
So you
But
think he holds back a little bit?
I think he flirted with it, but I don't think that he went all the way. And I
Interesting.
think that's because he didn't go far back into his whatever it was and try to explain away. And I think that might be the inherent problem of a good serial killer, real life serial killer film, because you can't explain what makes people do that. You know what I mean? It's a perfect storm. It's a little bit of psychopathic behavior. It's a little bit of environment. It's a little bit of DNA.
Right.
And so that's what makes it so difficult to do. So it's hard for a clear director's vision to emerge. You know what I mean?
And I think if I could get behind the argument that the director was in the long run trying to attempt something like that, the problem is in the script stage. That script was just unfinished. If that's what he was trying to do, I mean, there's no amount of direction that is going to convey something like that. It's a screenplay problem.
Interesting. Very interesting. Hey, did anybody else think that Renner captured Dahmer's dancing down to a great science, like when he was in the gay bar, the way he swayed back and forth. Because I just really found that fascinating. I don't know about you guys. Hey, listen, I really appreciate everyone's input on Dahmer, and I think we had a really great conversation. Let's get to rating the film Dahmer. We have a 5-star system here, 1 being poor, 2 being fair, 3 being good, 4 being very good, and 5 being excellent. I'm going to start with our guest, Mr. Max Cook. Max, what do you got for me, my man?
I would give Dahmer a very solid 4. I think it's a very strong film. I think that Jeremy Renner is extraordinary in it. I think he had a lot on his shoulders, and in the commentary he talks about how this was a very tremendous challenge for him. And again, thematically with the evening, he kind of doesn't remember a lot of filming it because he was in such a dark place to create such a great character. And it was a great character. I mean, and I was really stunned that the truthful things really happened. You know, the bullet points of the film, you know, the dummy in the closet, the head in the box, the Asian kid who wandered out in his panties or whatever.
The lobotomy, which we didn't talk about.
Oh yeah, that really happened. That's how Jeffrey figured it out.
That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to zombify these
these people, and we saw it.
And become sex slaves. Yeah.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to say is you don't need trial scenes because they always suck. All you need to see is the trial of Jeffrey Dahmer, which is a real documented 90 minutes of footage that's available on DVD. I mean, it's cool. Utterly fascinating, and you get the benefit of the victims screaming at Jeffrey in the courtroom about how he hurt them. Oh. And it's all the comeuppance you need.
Wow. Billy Grimm, what do you, go ahead, get it over with. What do you got? I see it coming. Yeah.
You're it's like you're personally hurt on a deep level.
I wanted you to like this.
I wanted Billy Grimm.
I'm so sorry. Tom. I have to give it 1.5 stars, and I give it the half star. I mean, everything about this is definitely Jeremy Renner's performance. I came away from that movie thinking, my God, that guy, he was smart to take on that role. And clearly everyone noticed, because he started getting work after that. And he was amazing. There's no doubt about it. But overall, just a poorly made film, unfortunately, 1.5.
Wow. Joey, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm not going to be so harsh. I think that, obviously Jeremy Renner's performance is pretty amazing in the film. And I think that there was a good attempt at doing something really out of the ordinary. And I think that there was some good they tried. And I think that they put something out there and they risked a little bit. I don't think that it crystallized. I'm going to give it 3 stars for that attempt.
Very cool, Joe. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to go with Max on this one, and I've always thought of this film as a 4-star film. Just the pacing, like I said earlier, is just so disturbingly patient, and Renner's performance is just so captivating, and that scene with his father with that lockbox was just so intense, and the non-linear fashion of the storytelling just was a little bit different, something that you definitely don't expect to see when you watch one of these films. So I'm gonna go with 4 stars, man. Thanks everyone for listening to the Dahmer part of the episode. Up next, we are reviewing the 2002 film from Matthew Bright entitled Ted Bundy.